Okay, so up to this point, we have shown how to give actions to the individual objects and how to have the objects respond to a key press. Now we need to create a flow between the objects. I've decided for a couple reasons that rather than having you select the character, we're just going to have it have a predetermined order. Maybe at the end I'll show you the alternative, but since this is really meant to be introductory, it's a little bit simpler to do it this way. So how does this work? Basically what's going to happen is right now when you click a button, it simply says to do a certain task, like press number 1 for her or number 2 for her. What's going to happen is we're going to create a variable. That variable is going to have several different values, and what's going to happen is when you press a button, the script is going to check not just what button you pressed, but it's going to check the value of that new variable. So the variable may be set to witch, the variable may be set to suit, or the variable may be set to enemy. And so it will then react, the system, the program will respond accordingly. So right now, it's just looking at if a key is pressed. It's going to take into consideration that additional variable. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a GM script. Now there's nothing special about it so much as that it just holds some of the values that don't necessarily mesh with any one character. So it's basically just kind of a holding object. So we're going to create a GM object and a GM script. So game object, create empty, we'll just call that GM. And again, nothing magical about it being called GM. It's just for you, the designer, to know what you're going to use it for. And then we right-click, create, C#, and we'll call this battle flow. Okay, so there it is, battle flow. So we're going to click on GM. We're going to put battle flow onto it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to open that up. And we want to create some static variables. So let's call this public static. Now being static, it means that the variable is going to be accessible throughout the application to every object, and it will only change if you change it. So public static, and let's just call this, let's make it an int, because we're just going to count through the positions. And we'll call this witch turn, and it'll be set to 1. Okay, so a few things. You can do this different ways. You could make this a string, and then rather than tracking a number, you could say track a name. So you could actually set this, if it was a string, to witch or suit or that kind of thing. Or again, you can just set it to a number. So 6 one way, 1/2 dozen the other. There's pros and cons to doing it either way. We're going to stick with the int though. So now here's why this is important. As I said, we're going to start now looking at this this variable, and the value of this variable to make decisions. So right now, WitchCon, okay, if input is number 2, then go ahead and do this. And for SuitCon, if input is number 1, then do this. Well, we're going to set them both to 1 now. Now, eventually, characters will have multiple attacks, but for now, let's standardize this, and they will both use the number 1. Okay, so now they both use the number 1, and that would not work. That means they both would move. So we don't want that. We want this second variable to now be considered as well. So, and we said we'll have the witch go first since she's on top. So if input.getKeyDown 1 and since we defined the variable in battle flow, we need to declare that. So battle flow dot which turn equals 1. Okay. So as we said, this is set to 1 to begin with. So if you press the number 1 key and battle flow is set to 1, then this will happen. So therefore, we're going to modify suit if the key is pressed and battle flow dot which turn equals 2, then this will happen. Now there's nothing changing this value from 1 to 2 yet. So let's go back to the which. So this starts off as number 1, and if you press the number 1 key as well, all this happens. Well, we don't want the characters like to be tripping over each other. So what we're going to do is we're going to have this be set to number 2 once this is finished, because this is what moves her back. So we'll come down here and we'll do battle flow dot which turn equals 2. Likewise with the suit, this is where they do the attack. Now in her case, it's not IEnumerator, it's the return function. So in here, we'll put in battle flow dot which turn, and it will be set to 3. So again, wherever you have their turn ending, that's when you want to change this. You don't want to change it too soon, because if you got one of these players who hammers on the keyboard, they're going to break it. So you want to, you basically want to make sure that they can't activate the second player or the second character until the first character is done. Now that's set to 3, what we want to do is when we go to enemy con, it says if space is pressed, then go ahead and do this. Well, we don't want the space to be pressed. As I said, that was placeholder. That was just to show you the functionality. So in the enemy con script, what we're going to do is we're going to say if battle flow dot which turn is equal to 3, then go ahead and do this. This is when the enemy returns. So once again, wherever the object returns, that's where you change it back to the next variable. Battle flow dot which turn equals 1. And now if I have not forgotten anything, just like that, you now have an order of events, just by adding that one variable and checking for that variable. So in the GM script, we added it and we set it to number 1. In the which script, we say, okay, if that value is equal to number 1, and you press the corresponding key, right now it's the number 1 key, it could be a button on the controller. Go ahead and do the animation as it was, but when it's done, set it to number 2. For the suit script, again, we're checking to see the button that's being pressed, and if this is set to number 2, do what it was always doing, and now when it's done, set to 3, and then here, for the enemy, we got rid of the checking of the press of the space bar, because like we said, that was placeholder. And now we're saying, okay, if this is equal to number 3, go ahead and do this. Only problem with this, actually, now that I look at this, this could be true over and over again. And so let's actually put this up here. So sorry for the confusion. Because this happens every single frame. So really, you want it to only happen once, so you need to change this right away. So let's do that. All right, let's give it a shot. Gonna press the number 1 key, she attacks, she goes back. Gonna press the number 1 key, she attacks, she goes back, and then the monster attacks. And ready? I'm gonna hit the number 1 key again. Just like that, you now have a battle flow. So first we created the objects, gave them their animations, made them respond to key inputs, and just like that, just by adding that one variable and checking for that one variable, you now have an order of events. So I think that's about it for this one. Kind of short, but very, very important. And you can now see how you would add more characters, because what you would do is if you had, say, another player here, then it'd be maybe 1, 2, 3 for the extra player, and the monster would be 4. If you have multiple enemies, one monster would be 4, the next monster would be 5, the next monster would be 6. And just on and on and on. That variable, that one variable, is determining who goes next. Now, there's little tweaks you can do, because right now, so for the enemy, as soon as they start moving, this is set to number 1, which means technically, again, if you got a player hammering on the keyboard, the witch could actually attack while the enemy is attacking. So what you could do is you could say have it set to number 4 here, just so the witch won't work, and then here have it turned back to number 1 like we originally did. But I'm not too worried about that. We can get into that in the fine-tuning in later videos, but I think that should do it for this one.